Hello ladies and gentlemen, Trippy AK here again for another C++ tutorial, and today we are looking at some pretty basic concepts, more on variables and mathematics. Now don't worry if you're not a big math fan, but hey, if you've been in a 9th grade algebra class, then you should pretty much do all math in C++. Or if you know how to handle money, taxes, even simpler stuff. I mean, if you know that 2 plus 2 equals 4, then you'll be perfectly fine. So, let's continue. There are two different types of variables. There is global, then there is local. So, the reason why it's called global is because it's outside of a function, or the body of a function, while it's on the inside, it kind of, holds it. These are arms. These little curly braces holding all the information. So if we were to have an integer value, well, yes, an int value, called num equal to 55, and then another integer value, num as well, of 10, well, you're probably saying, which one do I use, 55 or 10? Well, how the computer works is that it reads from top down, and whatever it reads last, it's going to associate that name with that actual amount. So you're thinking maybe 55 or maybe 10? I don't know. Let's see. It's going to be 10 because, as I said before, it goes top down. That's cool, but what if I want to print out the, say, health of a monster? Now, since it's on the outside and since computers go top down, it's going to see this. So let's say we're playing World of Warcraft and the monster everyone can see, that's why it's global, is 55, while my man is 10, while the next one could be 20 or 30 even. Now, when I see this, I'm going to see my health. But I want to see the monster's health to make sure that me and my teammates are making progress. Well, in order to see the global variables, we have to use a unary scope resolution operator, which is 2 colons. Now, this is typical if you're going to access things in a certain library like std : cout, or in object-oriented programming when you're talking about a class and a function, you'd use that to say it's a part of this class, which will be on the left side. But since it's nothing at all, it's going to say global variable. So num. Okay, so let's see, and now it's 55. Cool. Whoop-de-doo, who cares? But I mean, the only time and reason you would actually do this is if you have two different data types. So double, and then let's make this some big number, and then if we see out, we see that it is such, 55 point, as you see. So, and right here we see unused variable num. That's because it's telling us that we have not used this. It's no big deal at all because it's blue, but then again, if you have unused variables, then you're just wasting space, because every time you declare a variable, you're taking up memory of the computer. The more memory you take up, the slower your computer will go. So just remember that. That's it for global and local variables. I mean, there's nothing much to it. Now, you don't really want to declare your variables as global, because then everything's going to get onto that, and that's going to cause a lot of bug issues. So as much as you can, try to put them in local functions to keep everything hands-free. Now, if you do need to, say for example, return the amounts type, then we could do that, but I'll show you that when we start getting into functions. Right now we're just going to use the main. So let's make another variable called int num, and it'll be, well, num2, and it'll be 5. The reason why I did 2 is because if you have the same name for quote-unquote different variables, you get an error, int num previously declared. So that is why we have the difference. So we build and run, it's no big deal. Now, there's a few ways to assign or do math. So if we do int sum, and we can declare it as nothing yet, then we could sign the amount as sum equals num plus num 2. So then if we print it out, see out, sum, then we should get 15, and we do. It works the same way as multiplication, division, and subtraction, so there's no reason to iterate. Yet, instead of doing that, we could obviously do num plus num 2, which will give us the same exact result, such as 15. It's the same thing. Now, that's cool, but let's say that's 3 variables that you're doing, and that's a little bit of memory, because next tutorial I'm going to show you actual size of, just to see what I'm talking about memory, because memory is encoded in bytes, and yeah, I'll explain next tutorial about bytes. So instead of doing that, let's say, for example, you're playing a video game, Call of Duty, and you have a magazine. It has 10 bullets. That's a pretty small magazine, but 10 bullets, and every time that you hold down the trigger, you use half your magazine because it's a 5-round burst. So instead of declaring int, this will be initial, then take away from, then resulting, and then plugging it back in, you'll just do basic math. So what you could do is num is equal to num minus num 2, but that's 1, 2, 3 times you're making a copy, a legit copy of the variable, so that's going to eat up a lot of memory. So instead of doing 3, you could do compound statements, which is num plus equal num 2. Now this may seem a little funny, but hey, trust me, it works. The way the computer reads is that it goes, sorry, someone texted me, it goes that old number plus number 2 equals new number. So when we print it out on the screen, it should be, well, since we're doing the example of Call of Duty using magazine, it should be 5. So there we go. It goes from 10, subtract 5, so the result is 5. That's very useful. Now, what if you're doing some crazy stuff in a magic video game where you have a multiplier effect? When you activate your special ability, your attack goes from 5 to 50. Well, works the same exact way. Awesome, huh? So that is the very basics of math, and as I explained before, if you know basic math, then hey, you know basic math. Now, there are certain ways to increment by 1 without even bothering to do so with math, and this is where C++ has its C++, because C++, wow, say that a lot of times fast, but this is the increment operator, then num is the decrement operator. So what this means is add 1, then this means subtract 1. C++ is cute, as in like, that's very silly cute, because C is the original form, then plus plus means, oh, it's just a small upgrade, which it is. So if you're to do num 10, then num plus plus, and then C out num, it should be 11, which it is. Then the decrement operator does the same exact thing. Now, the order of this does matter, because this is pre-increment, and then plus plus behind it is post-increment. So, I mean, it's kind of hard to explain. You just gotta understand that it's gonna do, say for example, 10, then plus 1, or 1 plus 10. I mean, there's no big difference, but once you get into for loops and such, then it's gonna matter. So those are the basics of math, and for you math geeks that are really into math, you could play around with the include library of C math, and it gives you access to a whole lot of things. Say for example, if we were to have, let's say pi, or human form of pi, which would be 3.14, and you wanted to round up to 4. So you would do ceil, then num, this is called a parameter. Whenever something is within parentheses, this is called parameters. So you're using a legit function. This is a micro function in the math library called ceil. So it's going to round up. And the parameter we're giving it, or extra information, is called num, which is 3.14. Parameters is within parentheses, then the argument is what you give it. I know it might be confusing, but you're going to just get used to it. So this should say 4, and it doesn't. Why so? Why so? Why so? Why so? Oh yes. If you remember, well, if you caught a quick glimpse, it said ceil double. Well, in order to make these things work, you're gonna have to follow the data types. Now, Python is a little bit more lenient because you could easily typecast. C++ has it too, but it's not very big and popular, and you shouldn't really typecast unless you absolutely have to. But for this example, we just change it to a double, and then if we go to num, it should work perfectly fine. And voila, same thing. Now let's see if we round down the floor. It goes to 3. Now, just for kicks, what's the sign of pi? It's that. That's cool. So, basically, this math library has a lot of stuff to it. I mean, you could go on Google, type in CMath, C++ library, and then just go over it. There's nothing really complicated about math. It gets as complicated as you want. And when we get into a basic blackjack game with all the win-lose logic and basics, you're going to see a little bit of math going on. So, pretty much, that is it. That is it for math and variables overall. Next, we're going to make I don't know what we're going to make next, but I'll see you next tutorial.